I want to backtrack a bit too with like basically doing comedy with like an Asian cultural background and that context. It's interesting because I had watched a play by the daughter of a Vietnamese refugee, and she had made this play about her mom and basically how a lot of cultural values in the Vietnamese North American community um, played a role in how she passed away. And she basically told this very moving story. She acted the whole thing out. It was a single person play. I cried, my partner cried. It really hit home for us on a lot of levels. And when she did a Q&A, someone said, "How did your family react to you telling this story?" And she said, "Not well," because they're like, "Why are you airing out our laundry?"
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. I've also gotten, not as a comedian, but just like as an Asian person, airing out my family's, history, or maybe you just, some people just need to vent, right? You need to explain a
Yeah.
situation, but maybe your Asian parents are like, why are you telling other people, about, the family dynamic kind of thing? It's just like, because either it's bothering me, or it's like I need to talk with other people to how do I navigate this situation. And yeah, I think it just comes down from that sort of like authoritarian top down kind of culture. And
Yeah.
respecting your elders, sort of being really exaggerated in terms of like how far someone needs to actually respect their elders, and what does respect actually mean in for different types of contexts.
Yeah, no, that is really meaningful too, because that was one thing that I continue to struggle with, right? Because a lot of my comedy comes from my lived experience from basically being a child of like refugee immigrant parents, and my mom came out to one of my shows, and she did not appreciate my jokes about her at all.
Did you
Which
say my mom is also in the show? Give it up for Mama Wong, right over here, right? Like, did you acknowledge her, right? Like, so that way, like, the audience could, feel, could empathize, right? And you introduce a new dynamic.
I really wanted to. I actually did. I really wanted to, but she explicitly said, "I do not want you to do that." Which I think it does come from a little bit of that background, right? Like no one kind of wants to be spotlighted, and it's like if you're gonna talk about me, don't talk about me in front of me.
You could have just said, "My mom is somewhere out here. I'll let you guess which one it is," right? And just don't say anything from there. So the spotlight is just widened, right, across the entire floor of older Asian women, and it can only be so many of those.
Yeah, that that's great because I actually I have a show coming up that I'm producing on Mother's Day coming up
Oh
in
boy, she's gonna
in
love this.
I invited her. I I said, "Mom, it's Mother's Day. Come down to the Mother's Day show I'm putting together." And she literally said, "No, I went to your last show. I'm good."
What about
I'm
what
like,
about your
"Oh,
what about your dad? Have you taken your dad to any of your shows?
I have invited him, but he coincidentally has work every time I invite him."
Okay. You should tell him the story of Jimmy O Yang and his dad, right? I don't know if you've heard his story about how
Oh
his
yes.
dad, like, also assumed like, oh, just being a comedian, right? Like, seems like an easy job. Anybody could do it. And like I'm sure as a comedian, it's like, no, I've worked really hard, right? I've had to go through so many skits. And then he was saying like, oh, his dad just showed up for an audition one day, and he looked like he was half asleep, and he's just like, he was just worried that his dad was gonna bomb it. And then lo and behold, he did it. It was just like he did it well. See, it's not so bad, right? Like, typical Asian dad, fashion. And I think Jimmy Oyang was just like flabbergasted, right? He just couldn't believe like how well like he did it. And he was saying like that his dad was getting more shows, more callbacks like than he was, right? Like for a short period of time. And that was, I think, the most amazing thing for him.
Yeah, I love that story. I actually love that story because in a way, like I imagine Jimmy Yang thinks this way too, right? He's like so proud of his dad
Yeah.
because I think I really do think that like children are like basically the best of parts of their parents and the worst
And the
parts,
worst, yeah.
and like I get my I think I get my best parts for both my mom and my dad.
Okay.
I know like from both of them. I know they have like performing hearts. Like my dad did martial arts a lot.
Okay.
My mom did traditional Chinese dancing. Like she like performed on stage and did that for a long time too. But typical immigrant experience. Their parents didn't really support that and stuff. Um, so when I go on stage, I'm like, this is coming from somewhere. And both my parents are basically, one way or another, artists or performers. And I like to think if my mom had the courage to go up on stage, she would kill it. I think she would kill
There's
it.
still time. Yeah.
I'm still trying to convince her. I'm like, look, half my material is you anyways. You can shit on me for a bit.
Yeah, just change the role, right? I mean, but maybe also like they're really, maybe she just doesn't feel comfortable with the forum, right? Maybe it would just need. I mean, I don't know what like the demographic, right, of the comedy clubs are like, but maybe she just needs to go to, I don't know, like, okay, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, like go to a mahjong hall, and that's where she does her stand-up bit, like, oh, my son, he tells me, a bunch of slanders my name, right? Just hear the mahjong tiles like clanging and stuff like that. Like that's where old people gossip anyways, right? So like it just has to be the right forum for that. Like maybe she's already
Yeah.
just, making jokes about you on, I don't know, like WeChat or something like that, or some other platform.
Yeah, you'd kill it on WeChat. For real. I would on my daytime job. I'd have to get her as an influencer or something.
Funny thing
Dang.
is that on my pod, and actually, this guy was actually my roommate in college. I'm not sure if you've heard of Martial Club. They are like a martial arts YouTube channel, and also they do like martial arts skits and stuff like that. And like some of them, the members were like in Shang-Chi and Everything Everywhere All at
Oh,
Once. So they did the fight choreography for that. But they said that a lot of their inspiration came from obviously Hong Kong cinema, which is kind of they're putting their own kind of unique spin, on that type of cinematic style of action where it's usually one pan, it doesn't cut. The way that my roommate Daniel had described it was when they cut stuff like an action movie, let's say it's like Fast and the Furious, it's like punch, cut, the other punch, cut, right? Like reaction, cut, right? Like everything is not smooth and in one shot. So he was saying how, uh, for a lot of his idols, in the Hong Kong, cinema scene, a lot of them went through like Peking Opera School and stuff like that.
oh.
So the fact that you said your dad is a martial artist, your mom is a dancer, so basically Michelle Yeoh is like the embodiment, right, of your parents, essentially, because she
Yeah.
was a dancer by training, and then she became a martial artist, as someone in Hong Kong trying to break into the action film genre. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
my take. You should have me go see Everything Everywhere All at Once, just because it's Michelle Yeoh's time to shine.
Yeah. I that is on my to-do list for sure. Yeah, she's definitely an inspiration because that is amazing. Like I remember watching a interview she did, right? And she talks about her dance background and how that really helped her with her martial arts background.
Yeah.
And I thought that was awesome because like I think um especially in I think the Asian community, like we segment out arts quite a bit. It's like dance is dance, martial arts is martial arts, right? And it's like written word is written word. And they all have parts that complement each other. And I think we should embrace that more. And I think we had a good step towards that with Shaolin soccer. I really do.
Okay.
We're like
Well, I don't know if
they
you
put martial
heard.
arts in soccer.
I don't know if you heard, but Kung Fu Hustle 2 is coming out.
I did not hear this. Amazing news.
Yeah,
Hell
I read
yeah.
about it recently. It was just like, I think it's like 15 years ago. The first one came out, I think. So,
Oh, has it been 15 years? Holy smokes.
so it's coming out. I don't know when. I just remember that it is coming out. They've got some promotional marketing materials already out.
That is amazing. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And I would say that that is one thing I think the Chinese community, like comedic wise, has held on to very well is their physical humor. I think is very much still alive and expanding. Whereas like I think with like Western comedy styles, it's going a lot more towards what would the word be? Clever wordplay, I
Okay.
would say. So it's taking a step away from like the Mr. Bean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Whereas I think there's a lot you can do with that, and I encourage folks, like don't think that's like a lesser form. I think that's great, and I think that is a whole genre on its own. Really do.
I think part of the peaking opera stuff is also what plays into what you were talking about earlier, where you had to sing, you had to dance, right? You had to act, and you had to do it all right on stage, right? There wasn't like, hey, we're gonna get you a stunt double for the action scenes. You're not gonna swap out, right? We're not gonna swap you out or voice you over, right? Like it's literally like the Chinese version of a Broadway play, right? But I would say
Yeah,
even
I was gonna
almost
say
even,
yeah.
but also way more intense, right? Because everyone has to do their own stunts, right? There's no stunt double for everything. It's just like everything I think in Hong Kong cinema was just very much on a budget. You didn't really have insurance policies or anything like that. Like, if there's no such thing as like maximum work hours, right? It's just like you keep filming it, you keep doing it, all that stuff, right? Until like you get it right? And there's just less or workers comp limitations,
Yeah.
right? In Asia, or specifically in China or Hong Kong for that kind of stuff. So you could say that whole process, like it's a grindhouse, right? You put your body and your soul through a lot, but like, especially when you're younger, you have the ability to obviously like recover from it, but like the Jackie Chans and Michelle Yeohs and stuff like that, they're kind of a lost era, right? Because you're never really going to see all that stuff
Yeah.
like again. But you could still see probably traces of that in like I'm assuming like Chinese variety shows and stuff like that your parents probably sort of maybe grew up with, or like they've seen some of their favorite I don't know, actors and stuff like that, like that they've known, for a really long time, and watched that. They basically grew up with them.
Yeah. No, I feel you on that for sure. It's interesting you bring it up. It's like in every interview Jackie Chan and Michelle Yeoh has done, like the interviewer will be like, so like who insures you? And every time they're like, no one wants to insure us. Because every insurance company knows that they're gonna get hurt. Because yeah, you're
Yeah,
right. They do all their own stuff. It's crazy.
yeah,
It's like you think it's like sometimes there's like camera magic, sure, but like for them, they are the magic,
yeah.
which is amazing to me.
So interesting. I don't know if you know, but for Shang-Chi, so I think Andy was Death Dealer. So his name's Andy Lee. Uh, uh, he was Death Dealer in the movie. He's part of Marshall Club, which is the group that my friend started with like two other people, Andy,
Nice.
Brian, and my friend Daniel. And my friend was saying how, or Daniel was saying how they use the Jackie Chan stunt team, right, for a lot of the Shang-Chi fight scenes. So like, for example, when they're the bus, right, like you have that, they're in the tunnel, right, they have the one shot, right, where they're doing all the action scenes. It's almost like a video game where you're kind of like progressing,
Yeah.
progressing through the bus, right? But it's not like they cut a lot, or cut as in like they didn't switch camera angles like that often. They kept everything kind of fluid through one scene. Or when they did like the whole catch the punch in the jacket, twist it around, like that's very Jackie Chan, Hong Kong cinema style
Yeah.
reminiscent. So we definitely do see where that influence is kind of trying to make its way back into Western cinema. And I'll bet like it's shorter scenes, or like in small bits and pieces.
Yeah, but I think yeah, both. I think even like yeah, Hollywood cinema could learn a bit from that too, because it flows like what you're saying, right? The flow is better. I think when you're watching those action scenes, when you watch what's the one with Optimus Prime, Transformers.
Transformers, yeah.
When you watch a Transformers fight scene, it just looks like two giant metal robots having intercourse or something. You have no idea what's going on. Like, oh, I guess there's robot sex.
Yeah.
I guess,
But I think the thing it
but
makes
like
it
yeah, with
go ahead,
yeah.
sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, with like Shang-Chi especially, like when he threw a punch, the camera went with the punch,
Yeah,
right? It wasn't like a
exactly.
static thing, and then like the other guy got hit in the same frame. Like the camera pivots with the motion, which helps you know like, oh, where's the motion coming from? Where's the motion going? Those things I think are small things, but big impact.
I think the thing that makes it really help stand out are two things. One, it makes it seem like it's a dance, like because that's where martial arts
Yeah.
and Chinese dancing, right? They kind of intertwine, right? Like they kind of almost, essentially, you could say almost one and the same, right? But when put on a stage, right, it's almost like a dance, right? Or even like when what was it? The main character, Tony Leung, and like his, then lover, like when they were doing their fight scene, which is obviously, I think it's was it reminiscent, very reminiscent of House of Flying Daggers. I think that's the one. It was either that or
Mhm.
Hero or something like that. Like it was very much a dance. Like you see them kind of like gliding, into the wind, right? They're fighting, but they're also like in love with each other. So it definitely tells like a story. So that's something one that I notice as an appreciation for. But also in the Shang-Chi fight scenes, like there's a comedic aspect to it, like because everything's shot in one thing, you could see how the props are being used, right? Someone starting from a weakened sort of, or a disadvantageous situation, right? They pick something up, right? And now they become uh they lead into a more advantageous position, and that humor of how they got there from being in a disadvantageous situation, to an advantageous situation, like that's the comedy and humor that comes from action, which you don't really see a lot of.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, that's something I really miss from Hong Kong cinema. Yeah, that they do that really well. Because I love how you broke that down too, right? It's like you come from a disadvantaged situation, and then like basically you use your coat, then you get a thing, then you get a stick, then you get a thing, right? And you kind of build up. I love that. Yeah,
I mean,
it's
isn't that the same
I
for like comedy as well? Or like when you're a stand up, right? You're just saying, like, I don't know, for example, so I was spanked as a kid, or I was beaten up by my mom as a kid, or something like that. Like you just start off with some trope and like some traumatic, experience, and then you sort of try to build your way up, like from that.
yeah, that's a great analogy. Yeah, actually. And it's like so some comedians go like the other way, right? They're like, I'm such in such a privileged position. I don't get you. But like, I mean, the most of us aren't.
Right.
So yeah, it's the majority of us. It's like, yeah, these are the hard things that I've lived through. Like, let's laugh at it together, which I think is great. And it's almost like I love how you kind of like had that like parallel to martial arts because it's I think for martial arts, especially in entertainment, people focused a lot on the martial but not on the art, which is something that Jet Li has said, right?
Yeah.
It's a balance, right? Otherwise, it'd just be like martial killing, right?
Right. Right. Right.
It would be like an art factor, but like there is an art factor, and I think with comedy, right, it's like there's make me laugh, make me think, but there's a balance.
Interesting.
It's not just
That's true. Like when you said make me laugh, make me think, right? I almost parallel that to uh, in, Chinese martial arts or like East Asian martial arts. There's this concept that I talked to my friend Daniel about, and it was like you're both the scholar and the warrior, right? Like as a martial artist, right? Like you meant like, but for the most part, a lot of what we see right in Western action films are like just the action pieces of it. They've stripped out the scholarly sort of aspect to it, and the scholarly aspect to it is like the morals behind martial arts, right? Like how you should conduct yourself, when should you actually use martial arts, right? Like should you be the aggressor, when to be the aggressor, and when to be more passive, right? These are all sort of moral or emotional temperaments. So it's interesting when you said a comedian makes you laugh, right? But also makes you think, right? So in this instance, it could be the laughter is like the martial arts piece, right? Like you find something that's really
yeah,
funny, right? It gets a lot of activity, a lot of action, but then there's the introspective part of it, which is the thinking part, which was something that was a unique parallel that I was just thinking through, kind of at this moment.
yeah. I love the way you put it. That is yeah, that is beautiful because yeah, I think with all things, right, especially if it's an art form, there is a balance, and And it sounds cheesy, but I think that's true, right? Because if you're just all hacked, then it's cheap laughs, and then there's nothing
Right.
to remember.
There's also no substance, right? There's nothing that like actually makes it very grounded. So if it's just like one funny thing after another, but they're all disconnected, right? I feel like it's just kind of like you said, all hacked together, stitched together, not with any sort of design in mind.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this comedian. He's a British comedian called Jimmy Carr.
I don't.
He's one of the big ones over there, and he's very famous for like very raunchy one-liners. And he'll have like a whole hour set where he's just doing like heavy one-liner after heavy one-liner. And he was doing a interview, and even for him, he was like, "Look, for me, what I've been doing for most of my professional career is giving these fleeting moments of happiness. Like I'll give a one-liner that hits really hard, makes you laugh, but it's not going to make you think or stick with you after you leave the show. You're gonna be like, yo, I had a really good time tonight, but after you go home, that's kind of it. Even for him, and I think for someone in his position and his career and his success, to be like, I am now working on more longer form comedy where I can tell more meaningful things, and for some of that to be equally as funny and for it to stick to people. I think that was great because he is very good at doing what he does,
Mm-hmm.
and even at that level, he's like, I can do more.
Got it. Just sounds like he was born in the wrong era, to be honest. He should have just been born in the TikTok era where it's just like you have your 6 seconds of fame and like, you kind of move on to the next thing, right? Like, very, very low context type social media platforms.